All right, this one's coming at you guys a little late. This occurred today, and here I have UTC time 2:56, which means probably earlier in the day. I'm not sure. I'm not even quite sure. So this is Gateway 30, and it's part of this channel here, channel 3041. I would call it, it's the gate of desires, and the 41 is the gate of fantasy. But together as a channel, the name is going to be the channel of recognition. And this is out of the Shaitan Parkin Human Design book. And this particular channel is all about feeling and emotion, and obviously it's comes up from the root center as a pressure to experience things or not, and it comes through our imagination, what we imagine we want to experience, and sometimes the imagining is enough with the 41. Similarly with the 30, it's about our desires, what we feel like doing, what we feel like getting into. And of course the result of that experience will be the result of it. It's just, is this the feeling you want to have, or is it not? And in the I Ching in general, it's called the clinging fire, this gate 30. And Ra in his rave I Ching also calls it that. And he talks about how this is rooted to a process that's changing. Then he mentions something about the Aquarius age beginning when the spring equinox is in Aquarius. In other words, when the sun is at gate 30, line 6. This is very interesting, because that won't be for a long time. And what we're talking about here is the energy, or what Ra's talking about here in this gate of feeling, is the potential of the awareness to recognize a feeling or not. It is the energy to generate a feeling or not. Now, he also comments not to get too caught up with the word awareness. Of course, the solar plexus is becoming an awareness center in a couple years. But that's not the point here. The point here is it's the energy to feel or not. And the basis for this feeling has to do with the hunger of beingness, the hunger of survival. And we all know this is related to desire in all the forms that it shows up. The desire for fame, the desire for wealth, the desire for success, the desire for sexuality, desire for particular foods or particular things. These are all generated by our own desires, and these experiences are ours to have or not. Now, the issue with the 41 is that we imagine we want this or we want that. But sometimes imagining it is enough, and we don't necessarily need to have the experience in the 41. And so the 30 has to do with, on a base level, it has to do with hunger and fulfilling that hunger. And so what Ra's talking about here is he's talking about food, and as the primary human need, being the recognition of hunger, and of course the energy to go out and pursue, kill for food or whatever it is. Now, just as food is a fundamental drive for this particular channel, this stream, sexuality is also a fundamental drive of this stream. I've always had a buddy who we would talk about for years, how the urge for desire in a reproductive sense or in a sexual sense is very equivalent with hunger for food. And it's just fascinating the experiences people have when they go to supermarkets, especially supermarkets that have hot food. There's food to buy. It's a very similar experience. It's very interesting. Now, the quote that Ra uses here in his Rui Ching is, "Freedom recognized as an illusion and limitation accepted as fate." Now, this is real interesting because there's a lot packed in this phrase. Most of what I talk about today will be within the bounds of this particular line or general line for this gateway. So I'll read it one more time. Freedom recognized as an illusion and limitation accepted as fate. Now, Ra likes to talk about how we live in this illusion of freedom, that ultimately freedom does not exist. Free will does not exist. That's an illusion of the movement of space and time. That's my definition. But he notes that this is the recognition that we all fit into a pattern, and in that we have our place. And in that limitation is a grace, not a punishment. It's the nature of what we are moving toward. The emotional quality of this gate is driving us towards this. It is an extraordinary thing to recognize that the deepest force in the emotional motor in this stream, what it is really looking for is to get out of the experiential business and to be satisfied with the pattern that gives value to the nature of what it is to be. So he's talking about the pattern that gives us the nature of who we are, of who we're being in our process. Now, human design is very much about a process that moves through us. We are not it. It is moving through us. It happens to be moving through the shape of a vehicle that we call human. And that's the process that human design is discussing. And that's the process that human design conveys. That it is a human design for the moment. Because the process of mutation, the process of evolution, now that I don't mean that necessarily in scientific terms as human design likes to utilize, but the process of the movement of consciousness itself is through this vehicle. Its ultimate conclusion does not seem to be this human vehicle. And this is kind of the strange kind of rooms that human design eventually takes us in, with its concepts of us being a moment in space-time, a particular fixture in space-time. And that's where we're at. That's what it is. So what does it matter what it's saying about a future time? For now, we're here, we're in bodies. And for those who've experimented with it, it's quite evident that it is the body that rules. It is the body that knows how to move around in this kind of soup or morass of energy, this realm that we're in. It's the body's intelligence that knows, unless you're a mental projector or a reflector, then you have a little bit of a different process. A little more of an external authority instead of an internal authority, but still a type and strategy. Now, with gate 30, or let me move on to those with gate 30. So if you have the gate 30 in your human design, and I do not, it doesn't mean I'm not conditioned by that energy, because right now at this moment I do. And I have the 41, because that's where the transits are. So everyone's going to be a little bit on a wave this week. You might feel it. You might feel an overlay of some kind of wave And not just that particular collective wave, but also the tribal wave of the 4037. As you can see right here, we got 2 active channels this week. And it's a south node in the 40. And so pay attention, see how you feel, see if that shifts and changes. See if you, I don't feel like doing that, and then like all of a sudden you feel like doing that, whatever that is. See if there is, through the impact of these transit gates, see if there are desires and fantasies that come up to want to be experienced. Are you invited into that? Are you sensing to manifest something related to that? Are you responding to something like that? Are you reflecting on some possibility? Are you invited to something wrong? These are all the different authorities, or some of them, according to type. And so something fun to observe. And we see the 55 is also active, and that's the one, and Venus is there. And Venus in the 55 is, that could be a process of emptiness, a process of needing kind of music, or feeling moody, feeling creative. And so this gate is called in the I Ching, and often in many books, it's called the clinging fire, because it relates to desires that are burning within. Now, this could be a desire for any kind of passionate endeavor. Could be entering into a relationship, entering into a specific pursuit, entering into an experience of some kind. And so the lesson for the 30 is to let go of any expectation as you enter into your experience. The lesson here is to trust, have faith, and surrender to that experience. Because us humans, the biggest problem with us is, all right, I'm going to have this experience, so let me quickly make a bunch of rules so I can control it. Let me create a bunch of boundaries so I can feel safe. And a lot of that is fine. Boundaries are great. So is consent and communicating across the bridge of two beings, what's safe for you, what's correct, and what's not. And that's all great stuff. And those are great kind of guidelines to have for an experience. However, you're also surrendering, you're trusting the experience of what you're agreeing to experience. And so either you are or you're not. If it's not to be trusted, then it's a no. Then the relationship is a no. Then the experience is a no. The pursuit is a no. And if it's a no, it's a no. And those of you who know your authorities, whether it's emotional, splenic, sacral, or otherwise, you will know that feeling in your body, because it's your body that's directing. And you will know whether that experience is correct for you to feel or not. And that's, in essence, what this is here. What are you going to feel? What are you generating to feel in this experience? Not what you're hoping to feel, but you're going to feel, you're going to go through something. And you're going to allow yourself to have that journey, to surrender to that possibility of feeling whatever it is you're going to feel. Because generally in life, we feel the highs and we feel the lows. There's no escaping the lows for the highs. And in fact, the higher experiences you want to feel, the lower you're going to feel, because all the great heights come with corresponding depths. That's just the nature of the game here. Which is why we have Buddhists and we have people that talk about capital B balance. Because they know that as the human experiences life, as they experience the extremes of things, they begin to know them and trust the boundaries and know that, okay, I can have this experience, I can have it like this, like that for the most part, and not fall into any extreme. But when we're young, we want to experience extremes sometimes. And sometimes we know it through what we hear from our brothers and sisters, or our parents, or our grandparents, or friends. And sometimes hearing about it is enough to know, yeah, that's not for me. And sometimes hearing about it is, wow, I want to experience that too. Because we're not all here to experience everything. And, nothing makes that more clear than especially astrology. And it's similar here too, because, human design also points to the North Node process. And every day we have signification in the North Node. And right now, humanity, the collective, is experiencing the 37 as the North Node. And that's in Pisces. And that's right here off the emotional solar plexus. And so there are layers to what we're experiencing on a collective frame as well as an individuated. And so tending these inner fires, we're talking about the clinging fire of our desires in Gate 30. And so tending to that inner fire reminds me of a song by a thrash band in the late 80s. Well, they were all playing throughout the 80s. Great band from New York called Overkill. And they had a song on one of the albums. It was like a ballad, I guess. I think it was like Who Tends the Fire. Great lyrics too. And I don't know if the lyrical theme was related to the fire of our inner kind of desires or wants. But what we have here is we have this tending to these fires in an appropriate manner, drawing the wisdom from your experiences as you proceed in life. And so in this, it's important to know that we can live our lives in different ways. It's not that life is just, well, I don't know anything, so I'm just going to touch that stove and burn myself, and that's how I'm going to learn. It's not always just, well, I'm just going to go out and drink till I black out, and just so I can have that experience and know what it is. It's not a life of just extremes, or some people say the school of hard knocks. It's not just that. We forget that our experience here we can also have fun while enjoying experiences that kind of illuminate our awareness. And one of those ways is, of course, to, living out your life and then getting those intuitive hits and senses that, hey, that's something I may want to do, but I'm not sure if it's correct. So let me check into how I feel. This is part of a feeling channel. And let me see if this feels correct for me to do. And if it is, it's jumping into that experience deeply, fully. And allowing yourself the totality of that experience. And then coming then out on the other side at some point and saying, wow, okay, I had an experience. I didn't know it was going to be like that, or, whatever. Maybe it was. The challenge here, of course, is this is a gate of desire. So, the whole lifestyle, like, for example, the 80s lifestyle, the whole, like, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the 60s, 70s, 80s, that's the kind of fire that's burning here. But as you know, with these emotional gates, these gates that create emotional channels connected to the solar plexus, and it's feeling clear or not, that it's about, do you feel clear to experience this, or do you not? And so with everything, these gates are dualities. Is this something you want to feel, or is it not? I'm going to sip some tea real quick. And so we move on here, and we're going to look at what Richard Rudd said in Gene Keys about this gate. Now, he likes to say a lot of things, as his writing is the most arduous and detailed on these gates. I just kind of went over, summarized Chaitan's summary of having gate 30, which is very practical and very excellent in its expression, that it's one of those gates like the 41 where, with that great reminder of letting go of expectation, allowing yourself to have the experience. The solar plexus center being the most powerful center in the human body allows for a great depth of experience. And thus it's not an experience that can be controlled. The journeys of this solar plexus center, these great feelings that come about through these experiences, they're intense, they're mutative, and they cause a lot of change, more than any other center in the human design body graph. And so what Richard talks about is the shadow being expressed as desire, and the gift as lightness, and the city as rapture. And so we'll start with desire. So Richard likes to use a lot of, how would I describe it? Maybe epiphanic type language, as well as a lot of how would I say, like I guess stirring statements of expression, like almost like little litanies. And one of them is the cycle of desire is eternal. And he starts out talking about how desire can take on many different directions. And we know the most primitive, the most primal expression of desire is to consume, to eat, to get energy, to survive. We know that in essence, this gate represents our genetic hunger. And it's connected to that need to kill to survive and be protective, which connects to the genetic, the collective genetic level of the species. But this hunger is also a hunger for experience itself. It's all connected. Our desires are all kind of connected to this survival kind of process of having experiences, having energy to survive, having experience necessary for the reproduction of the humans. And again, it's brought up that in order to master our human environment, we as humans had to have a lot of experiences. The highs, the lows, the wide. And that these experiences are necessary in order to kind of find our boundaries as beings. And there's a lot of extremes in our species. We're all aware of this. We all like to point and say, that's not human, that's anti-human. I mean, it goes to all extremes. There's rumored, especially now with everything coming out and, the fall of coincidence theory and the realization that there's humans among us that are doing atrocious things that still continue to do them. But are they even human is the deeper question. A question that's not really addressed in human design. And even in the beginning was kind of shooed away. But not disacknowledged, not completely disacknowledged. There was acknowledgement of that there are other beings, other types of beings. But we're talking about ultimately a collective process here, because gate 30 is connected to the 41. That's a collective channel. That's for the collective. It's a collective process to experience all what it offers to be in a human body. And so in that collective process, there's great risk. And so it is in this channel that death can occur. Death not just to individuals, but to collectives, to islands or countries or races. I mean, all this, and I love to bring this up. I don't love to bring it up. It is just so atrocious. I mean, we have, one of the biggest kind of triggers for humanity currently is to bring up different races and their experiences they've had, and there's so much conflict and disagreement over what happened to which race, to who, to what, to when. And I mean, I just like to usually acknowledge the ones most kind of kept under the rug and unknown. The massacre of the Yazidi people of northern Iraq, or there's even a sect that was right below Baghdad, a sect of people. I'm forgetting already what their name was, but I think it was the Karaites, and they were completely wiped out during the Gulf War. I mean, how often do people talk about those two races? I think there's still some Yazidi left in Calgary, Canada, where they were kind of sent to recuperate, but there's less than thousands of them left. And so, we have this. It continues forth. We have races becoming extinct or completely annihilated. These are all experiences of the collective. That's just what it is. I mean, of course, lending moral value to it is necessary, and I don't shirk away from expressing the horror of such. But what we're talking about here is gate 30 and the need for experience in an intense way. And in an individual way, this gate, of course, manifests as personal desires. Like, is this your desire? Is it not your desire? The recognition of what desires you want to fulfill in this life and which ones you don't. And somehow the argument is, Richard makes this argument that our desires are necessary because they're the raw material to experience higher states of consciousness. This is something Osho would agree with. And of course, all the early human design group, Chaitan included, Ra included. I don't know if Richard was included in this, but they were all Bhagwans of Osho, which again is really fascinating. Osho, of course, was a very interesting character and expressed similar values and the necessity of whatever a human does to do it fully. Whatever your choice is, whatever it is. He has this great quote I always like to bring up where he talks about, if you're going to smoke, feel the whole process of what it is to experience the smoking. Feel the smoke as it moves through your lungs, in through your lips, in through your throat, all the way to your lungs and back out as you exhale. Fully enjoy that experience. And so Osho is very much, and I don't have his chart in front of me, but as a projector, maybe he had gate 30. And I don't mean as a projector that he's going to necessarily have that gate or channel. I just mean to say that his human design type is projector. Now, of course, this takes us to the question of what is desire? Well, desire has to do with an expression of who we are in our beingness as humans, experiencing consciousness, the need to eat, the need to have experiences. But Richard acknowledges desire itself as something that's a pure reaction to our environment. And that in this level it really isn't for much except experience. Because he says once desire is sated, you are empty again. And then you go through the whole process again. And then he goes on to say, all our desires are one and the same. We must clarify. And this is what I added actually. We must clarify the arrows of our desires and focus them so they hit their target points. And that's what we do. I mean, we create goals and we utilize our desires to succeed materially or to succeed in whatever goals we have. But one very interesting thing that Richard said is he said that we can never transcend our desires. So he talks about treating our desires as like house guests that, ultimately will leave. So it's that whole thing about experiencing our desires as something that is there. And we can pay attention or not. Kind of hit or miss, kind of yes or no, kind of this desire, maybe not that one. And in his expression of what it is to fulfill our desires, he talks about humanity's manifestations of these extremes of repressing our desires, formalized in the process of religion, and overreacting to these desires, present in paganism, which kind of externalizes all experiences of desire, whereas religion suppresses. Both extremes, of course. And so then, as usual, Richard will move on to the light expression, or sorry, not the light, the gift expression of the particular gateway. And in this case, he's talking about what's described as lightness. And here he talks about the kind of paradoxical relationship of having desires and, fulfilling them or not. And he talks about how we react to these desires. If we become tense or if we surrender to them. And the paradox of this process is that we're moving here in the gift to the higher mind. We're surrendering to the higher self. So we're just realizing that we're kind of helpless in the face of our desires, that we're all just kind of just normal human bodies. And all of us to some extent processing the same consciousness through this body. And really the only choice is to allow it to be what it is and do what it does. And in the highest expression, of course. And so the paradox here being that in accepting that, we're human and we all have these erratic, strange desires that come up that are ours or not ours. And in recognizing that, there's a shift that can occur. There's a lightness that can happen. That, okay, I guess I'm human. I guess this is what happens. I'm not going to try to control it or repress it. And then on the other hand, I'm not going to indulge in everything. I mean, I'm just going to indulge in what feels correct for me. And so in that, there's a lightness that is born. And a recognition that you're living your life according to, what it is. What it is you want to feel and what it is you don't. And it's not like the ultimate consequence or experience of that feeling. Because again, it's something you jump into. The emotional wave is something that moves. So the experiences that are colored by the solar plexus are real adventures. Real movements of energy. And so his message is that we should not treat our desires, and I don't mean to use should, would, or could here, because really that's kind of the giveaway. If we treat our desires like magazine articles, then, we're hearing the experiences of other humans, and we're like, well, I might try that. That sounds good. I could do this. Maybe I would do that if this or that. That's really nothing. Those are just kind of thought reflections. The generators will respond to life and come to life in an experience or not, or ground it out through their aura. The projectors will accept that invitation or they won't, or they say, no, it's not for me. The manifestors will choose to let people know and manifest an experience or not. And the reflectors will sample away. But the point here is that we're not here to escape our desires or to transmute them. We're here to experience the desires we're here to experience, and to not experience the ones we're not here to experience. And in that, the realization that we really can't fulfill our desires. It's not something we're really here to do, because desires is something that spans out like a spiral over all of human experience. There's always gradations of human experiences and layers of it. And there's new desires being born every minute. And some are so extreme that they spiral out into like these anti-human seeming expressions of consciousness that are, could be totally out of control. So with the city, we have a movement into a trust of yourself, and a trust that the real desire behind all these materialist desires is a desire to transcend to another state of consciousness. And that's another level of surrendering to the divine currents that flow through. And so then the clinging fire becomes a burning into which you experience higher states of consciousness. A surrendering and an allowance of the higher self to take on a higher expression of beingness. And in these different levels of allowance, then any type of suffering attached to our desires is kind of let go of. Just as we fully let go of the expectations of what it is to be human. Because ultimately we're kind of like testing out these vehicles. We're testing them out. Let's see how this one drives. Let's see how that one drives. We're kind of the volunteers of consciousness, expressing ourselves in these vehicles for the time being. And does there really need to be more than that? We're in these bodies right now. And the real question is, are we fully embodied in these bodies? And thus fully experiencing our experiences? Or are we meditating on them? Are we living in our mind and trying to fulfill the ungrounded fantasies of the mind, which perhaps aren't even ours? You look here on this day as we have these two channel activations with the 3041 and the 4037, you see the head and Ajna center are open. We're processing the collective energies through the open centers. And if you have these centers open, you're just thinking about a lot of shit that doesn't matter. Saying a lot of stuff that's not yours. Thinking about a lot of things that aren't relevant. If you have the 40, if you're a projector, manifestor, reflector, and if you have the 42 or the 46, or any of those two, then you'll have activation to the sacral. You'll have some extra energy this week. And so know that, and utilize that. And so I'll leave it at that. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully I didn't go too long this week. This is Gateway 30. And next week we'll do probably the final Aquarius Gateway for the month. And this today, the 14th, Saturday the 14th, coincides with the beginning of the movement towards the Aries vortex perfection on the 20th. As of today, Saturn has gone into Aries, and now we have both Neptune and Saturn in Aries, and they will meet on the 20th, exact at 0 degrees. So this is a huge buildup. And for those of you who've been listening to my playlist, I have a bunch of videos on the Aries vortex. Feel free to listen again as we move towards this date. Tomorrow, I'm going to do a collaboration with the local astrologer, who also has her own channel. She likes to talk about Venus, so we're going to have a Venus and Pluto trine as we connect and collaborate and talk about Pluto. As you guys know, Pluto is the thematic of my channel, and we'll have some fun talking about the Venus star point, and probably talk about the Aries vortex again as we move closer to the 20th. And then on Monday I'm going to do another collaboration with Mario and Casey. We're going to do an episode of Wayfarer Astrology. We're going to do probably another big show on just talking about, I think everyone's going to bring a chart. I'm going to bring an Aries vortex chart. So that's been my focus. I think Mario's going to focus. He might be focusing on the March 3rd eclipse. And then Casey might bring a focus too. But we're all astrologers. Mario's an evolutionary astrologer, and Casey's an astro-theological astrologer. And these days I'm studying a lot of Hellenistic astrology, so we're bringing all that together, and I may bring in some human design insights here and there, but that'll be Monday. And then on Friday, Gary and I are going to do a collaboration. I should ask, I'm not going to say who our guest is, because I don't know if Gary's put that out there yet, so I'm going to wait for that, and I'll talk to Gary and see that's an exciting collaboration. That's going to be really exciting. That's going to be for our financial astrology episodes that we do. Okay, you guys, thanks so much for listening, and take care.